Welcome to another episode of the Insights Frontier. I'm Odun, your host, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Lydia James. Lydia has a ton of experience, leading senior teams across really complex industries. She's worked in automotive, she's worked in e-commerce, home improvement, and so I'm really excited to have her here. And this is the fourth time we're speaking this year. I met you at three other conferences already this year, and it's always been a pleasure when I talk to you. So welcome to this session, Lydia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And just congratulations on the endeavors that your company is making, the huge strides. And I welcome this opportunity to meet with you and see how we can partner in the future.
Fantastic. So today we're going to be speaking about leading through disruption, and you'll be sharing lessons on transformational customer experiences. You've led CX teams, sales teams across different industries, and it would be great to just tap into your background, your experience, managing these teams through disruption and continue to set the bar, the focus for the team to continue to navigate change. And so given your experience you've had, and now you're running your own consulting, what really led you to the operational side of, customer experience?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And just to kind of share a little bit about my background to what you mentioned, I've always been in a lot of complex areas, and I've always pioneered new endeavors. And how do we get to a destination that we haven't been before? And that always meant bringing people along with me and looking at our overall processes. And then how do we enable technology to help us get there faster? And and as I kind of reflected on my career, it has been constant that way from the beginning of my career. And while I'm in the CX space right now, I've always been in the customer space and even in the operations space, because my role has always led me to look at a business problem and how do we get to the root cause of it, and how do we transform what that problem is into wins. And so in doing that, I've always started with what are the customer pain points? And a customer could be an internal user or it can be an external customer. And so I've always looked at what are the pain points and what are the root causes of the pain points, and what's the processes attached with those pain points, and how do we really get to what needs to be different in order to get a different outcome or the outcome that we desire. And so I've learned early in my career that you have to take people with you. You have to talk to them about the journey. You have to understand their role in the journey, and also kind of how do you start building that vision of where you want to go and getting their involvement into the process. So from a customer experience standpoint, customers win in the sense that if you don't have customers, you don't really have a business. And so how do we really maximize the return for the customer and really operationalize in a streamlined way internally, so you're not increasing waste? You're really focusing on how do we do it simpler and faster and at scale. And at that point, you have a win on both sides, because if the customer wins and the operations is doing it efficiently, is a win-win across the board.
Fantastic. Now, just double clicking on that word disruption. So
Yeah.
personally, what does disruption mean to you, especially from a leadership perspective?
Yeah. So great question. So when I think about disruption, I think about it in two aspects. I think it's the operations of the business. I'm just going to pick operations for now. And then I think the people of it all, right? Because it's the people who drive the operation. So it's really something that disturbs or disrupts how you are operating today. And it may be one little change or it may be a huge change, but it stops you from focusing the way you have focused before and requires you to make a shift or a
Yeah.
pivot in that new direction. So when I think about what disruption means to me, is how do you bring calm to chaos? And with any disruption, there is a degree of chaos in some areas more than others. And how do you really take where you're trying to get to, taking the current dynamic of what the disruption has caused, and how do you kind of lead people through that to get to the outcome? And so personally, what I've also realized that while you're focusing on operational disruption, there's a personal impact as well, because it often requires us to learn new skills. or it can require us to move to a new location. And there have been times that I've moved for my career, and so that means packing up the house, moving the family, leaving what's familiar, and going into a new space and meeting a whole new team, understanding a whole new business structure, setting up my home base, and really moving forward. So the disruption happens on both sides. And how do you really anchor yourself on something that helps you stay calm through that process and focus through that process to get you to the other end?
Mhm. That's very interesting. You have a military background, so you've done work in the military. How does that, or how did that experience, that foundation, how did it help you as you transition to customer experience transformation? That foundation that you had, how did it impact you or influence your approach to managing customer centric change?
Yeah. So I didn't realize how much my military background really helped me. And it's been a few years now. As I keep looking back, every time I change roles or get positioned for something else, I realize I always anchor back to that. Or whenever I feel very disrupted internally, there's something that's affecting three things that the military has taught me. I served in the Air Force, and our core tenets is service before self, excellence in all that you do, and integrity first. So, from a service perspective, it's all about the mission, and the mission is greater than any one person. And it's how do we all come together to execute that mission? So, when you think about customer experience, we have a mission. We have a business that have a product or service that they're offering to a client or a customer, and the customer has a problem that they're trying to get solved. And so the mission is how do you do that in the most frictionless environment where the customer can come back and repeat that cycle again and again and again. And all things being equal, experience wins. So if you can have the best product, you can have the best service, but if the experience isn't where the customer feels excited to come back again, or there's some friction there, they're going to vote with their wallet and go somewhere else. So, what the military taught me is that it's not good enough to know your job. You have to know your ins and your inputs and your outputs. Like who are you taking it from, that the role that you're playing, who's giving you something, and after you're done doing what you're doing it, who are you giving it to? And so our job required us to know both ends as well as our job. So that means from a service perspective, it's not good enough to do a good enough job of what you're doing and say, well, I passed on the problem to someone else. That's not my problem anymore. It's out of my box. And that's not good enough. And so that had really set a foundation for me to say, it's not good enough for me just to know my job. I need to understand the inputs and the outputs, and I need to understand the customer pain point. I need to understand what the challenges are. I need to understand what's going to really happen with what I when I leave, when I hand it off. And in the military, it's mission critical. Lives depend on the service that you provide. So integrity is important. If you see something, say something. You have to really operate from a high standard, and you got to deliver something with excellence. And it's not just 20% today, because that means someone can't complete the mission on the other end. And it also taught me that everyone's job, or every little role or role that you're doing that you think is insignificant, is very significant in the grand scheme of things. Because if you are in the military, my job was logistics, and we would say you can't fly without supply. So it may be a bolt, or it may be an O-ring that needs to go on an aircraft. And if any of those things malfunction, then the plane can't fly. And now you have lives that's dependent on it. So you take your job very seriously. And so that translates to customers, because they vote with their wallets every day. And we work very hard to earn an income. And so in doing so, you want to make sure wherever you decide to spend your money, you feel like your service is being fulfilled. And then you want to make sure that you want to know that that product or service works for you. So it is about customer loyalty, customer experience, taking the friction out the process, and its overall excellence in our internal partners and stakeholders, as well as the end customer that we're delivering, whatever the service or product is.
Fantastic. I really like that. And I think it's something that is really common in a lot of military environments, ownership. the degree of ownership you need to have with your job.
Yeah.
And I really like the fact that it translates to just serving customers and focusing on service. Now, doing that while managing disruption
Yeah.
is challenging, right? So how do you make sure that the customer voice is at the center of your decisions while going through disruption?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not easy. But I think that the customer has to be at the center of everything that we do, and because it really brings back the why. What I found over all these years of leading people,
Mhm.
they are motivated by understanding the why and how they impact the why. And also how are they getting developed in the process of the why. So I anchor my team and my partners and people that we're working with, whatever we're transforming, because it's a large enterprise team that you really have to pull together. It's not just one or two people. You got to really look across the whole ecosystem and really bring people together at the table. And I really look at it's very cliche to say the what's in it for me or what's in it for them, but you really have to, because everyone's coming to the table with a different perspective, and understanding what their role is, similar to the Air Force, the gives and the gets. Like, how do you contribute to this, and how does this impact you? And here's the reason why we're doing it, and what does that mean to you in a grand scheme. You got to be able to personalize it and localize what that overall value is to each person that's a part of the team, and then you keep them focused on that. This is the mission. This is what we're going to do. Here's a vision. You got to cast a vision, tell them what it's going to look like. Be very transparent, and have empathy in saying this isn't going to be easy. We're going to have tough days. But what we want to commit to each other is, how do we operate when we're having tough times? One of the tactics that I like to do is always put together guiding principles. Every
Mhm.
time I form a new team, I think we have an opportunity to say, how do we work together? What works, and allow everybody to have a voice at the table. And one of the things that I've always said with my team is, I want to see everybody's fingerprints on me. That goes back to the ownership part that you mentioned earlier, right? Because it's easy to say I'm on the team but not be on the team, especially if it's easy for you to lob grenades over the fence because you have zero ownership. No, 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 no. I want everybody to be as part
Yeah.
of the team, because we rise and we fall together. And so the guiding principle is one of the tactics that I use, so everyone can have a voice and say, how do we escalate issues? How do we deal with disagreements? How do we come aligned when things are falling off the tracks? How do we report weekly? What do we define as a functional team? What do we define as success? How do we celebrate these wins? How do we make sure we take care of each other? And it really helps to unite. And whenever I notice we're starting the team is going through and feeling the chaos, I bring it right back to the center again and says, is there anything on this that we need to adjust? We created it 3 months ago. Here we are now, knowing that we're all kind of feeling some of the tension. Do we need to readjust our guiding principles? It reminds them of what we agreed to, and it really helps to reset on behaviors and really say, okay, this needs to be adjusted or not. And it helps them to kind of move forward. But ultimately, you got to keep the goal front and center very often. It needs to be something that the team sees weekly, daily, and you got to remind them what's in it for them and the overall why and why we're doing it.
Yeah, you're clearly really big on teams, teamwork, team culture. But not every leader is, you know, going to find it easy to navigate disruption. So, what do you think is the difference between like leaders who can navigate disruption and take their teams along, and those who would get overwhelmed by such a process?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference with meeting people where they are versus having people meet you where you are.
Mhm.
And I think that as a leader, your job is to not only set where we're going and why it's important, but you have to adjust to the people on the team to bring them along. It's easy to say, this is where we're going and this is milestone one, everyone get there. But we all show up with our different perspectives, different personalities, different life experiences. We hear things differently. We have different filters in which we digest information. And quite frankly, a lot of these transformation initiatives impact people's jobs, whether it be a reduction or a transformation in how they're doing their jobs. It really impacts their jobs. So I think strong leaders, what I've seen and what I've learned in the past is they walk the walk and they come to meet you. And they talk to you about what's going on, ask you about your challenges, get your voice, and really help to bridge and bring them forward. Now, when you have a large team, it's hard to do that. You can't touch everybody
Mm,
personally, right? But I do think that it is our job as leaders to have an open door policy and to have make people feel welcome. There are different ways in which you can reach the team at large, but your leadership team needs to also display the same beliefs that you have, but you have to be able to walk that so they can mimic the same things too. But I think firmly we got to meet people where they are, and people we're in the people business. And so ultimately, regardless of what we're doing, we're dealing with people, and they're not widgets. They don't all function the way we expect them to do. They're not computers. So we really have to tap in and have some emotional intelligence to really figure out what's going on, what are the barriers, the things that are creating blocks, and have a kind of open conversation with them. Some people you're able to move forward with you. Some people you may have to shift them out because everyone's not built for transformation.
mm.
And part of the leader is really finding the team that can help you drive the vision forward. And I think a lot of times we want to do a one size fit all, and we think that the team that's there is going to be the team that transforms. Well, you look back a year later and you haven't really moved because you're trying to do different things with the same people, and everyone's not built for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember my time at Shopify, we had this principle or value, which was around like thrive for change. Like you have to figure out how to adapt because things change very quickly.
Yeah,
Almost every there was
yeah,
a new goal, there was a shift in how we're, approaching things. And I think that really helped company evolve and be successful. And so let's talk about your coaching. Like how do you think about coaching in
yeah,
terms of when things are changing very quickly in the market and business on the
yeah,
customer end? How do you think about coaching? How do you like to coach your teams through that process when
yeah.
everything around them is changing?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. And it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about meeting people where they are. And so I firmly believe, going back to we're in the people business, we build relationship with our teams and the people that we're dealing with. So you can kind of sense without them saying it when something is off. If you're
Mm,
emotionally aware and really building a relationship with people, you can tell this person is acting differently today. Something's off, right? And you don't quite know what it is, but I kind of watch and observe, and then I check in. How are you doing? And then I was like, yeah, I noticed in this meeting you kind of said this. What's going on here? So I probe, and then I decide, given who I'm dealing with, am I a coach at that point? Am I an advisor at that point? Am I a friend at that point? Am I a boss at that point? What role am I? What do they need me to be in that moment? And I adjust to really help them get some clarity of the reality, and then really talk about where they need to go and how do we bridge that. And that has helped me to be very successful in just leading teams, and even as I lead in my own coaching business. You really have to figure out where people are and really ground them in the reality, understanding what they see as reality, ground them in what the true reality is, and really help them build a bridge to get there. But you have to really switch hats and understanding what do they need at this point. That will help, what can you apply to help them be more successful, overcome a barrier, or kind of move to the next step.
How do you scale that? So when you have a layer right under you, kind of easy to be there, to listen, to switch
Yeah,
modes. But when you're managing teams of teams,
yeah,
how do you scale that culture?
yeah. That's a good question, and it becomes more of an art than a science. But I feel like people mirror their leaders, and the leaders set the tone. And this is where you have to walk the walk. And they are going to do what they see you do, less of what they hear you say. And I like to do, I call them my little ride-alongs. I'm like, yeah, let me join you. How are you doing on this? And I'll join you in the meeting. I'm like, you take the lead, but I'm just here to see if I can help and support. And sometimes that's a coaching opportunity afterwards. I say, here are things that you did really well. Here are some things that I think that you could have covered, and just really help coach them and guide them through that process. But a lot of it is based on, I bring them into meetings that I'm in or situations that I'm in so they can see how I handle it, and allow them to give me feedback. I may not be right all the time, but a lot of what they don't understand, I kind of give them the backstory. Well, let me give you the backstory. This person, I've seen them for a while, and something's off here. And in fact, this was we've had real meetings like this. It's like, that person's not acting like the way they normally do. I'm like, well, how do you know that? Because this and this. I say, go check in on them. And they'll
Mm.
go check on that person. It's like, you're right. This and this happened. This and this happened. Something happened with their family or something happened at work. And I'll coach them with, okay, ask them this. Have you thought about this? What do you think they need? And get them coached up in the background, and then so they can go have that conversation with their team. So there's been a lot of time. There's a lot of time investing in the team that way. But what it does is it sets them up so they can be stronger leaders. And so there's less of a pull on me because now I've developed an army of people who can actually go out and have a, I call it a broader skill set of how to deal with situations and people, and not be so one track mind. Because people are complex. We're very dynamic, and we show up to work with a lot of our challenges that we have going on at home. And so there's often that we've got to look at both sides of it and look at that whole person. I think one of the key other things that I would say to this is manage people from a whole person, not just from, you are my employee and you work for me and all I care about is the job. You got to take the whole thing in context, because we show up with our whole selves regardless if we say it or not. It shows up.
Yeah.
This video was brought to you by Insight 7, the AI platform that transforms customer conversations into performance improvements, helping managers and leaders coach their reps to deliver better customer experiences. Visit insight7.io to learn more today and subscribe to our channel for more leadership insights.